All right, we're taking your questions tonight about offshore injuries. Helping us answer your questions tonight is our guest, Tim Young from the Young firm in New Orleans. And Tim, I just kind of wanted to go back to what Alan was talking about there with boat accidents. We've been talking about this in an industrial sense, like working for these companies, going off and working on rigs and people get injured. What about if you're just offshore fishing or just you're boating and you get injured, something happens? Do you have cases like that? Does maritime law apply to those folks?
Maritime law is going to apply to a boat accident. Well, we've seen, frankly, a fair amount of cases on her when boaters are out and they hit obstructions in the waterways. And a lot of times they feel like it may be their fault, but if the obstruction is not marked or lit properly, then there actually is a claim against whoever owns that obstruction. And you see this with old oil and gas structures, that they don't mark them when they abandon them. Mm-hmm. You see it even with dock owners, if they have a dock that extends out far. So sometimes the boater feels like they're at fault because they hit something. That's not necessarily the case, though. And maritime law does apply and may give them a remedy in that situation, like Alan was saying.
Yeah, we had a case here. Fortunately, it wasn't an accident, but just like industrial debris out in the bay, like a very large object that someone almost hit, and they like got in the water and tied a life jacket to it so it'd be visible to someone. Right. Does it matter if you're in state waters or international waters, or how does that change anything with when you're looking at these cases? Does it change what venue they're reviewed, in what jurisdiction? How does that work?
No, whether you're in territorial waters or out in international waters, it's not going to make that big a difference. As it won't make any difference as to the law. And your time periods are all going to be the same. The place where you can file the suit is really just depends on a whole lot of stuff with the facts of that particular case. The law is all the same, though, whether you file it in state court or in federal court. So it is a single body of law that does not change depending on the court that you're in, which is nice. That's why, as Bill was saying, our practice is up and down the Gulf Coast, and he and I have a case now in Lake Charles. We have another one over in Mobile together, and the same law is going to apply in both those cases. So it's pretty uniform throughout.
And it's interesting.
And Andrea, if I may, so I mean, Tim, what we're talking about, if you're on a Lake Lanier, in the middle of the state of Alabama, or the Tom Bigby River, or the Gulf of Mexico, or in the middle of 80 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico, the same law is going to apply, correct?
It is. Yep.
Yeah. And
Bill, I wanted to get back to a point that I thought was interesting that Alan raised, and I think he's talking about contributory negligence, where the 1%, if you're 1% to blame, then you get nothing, but in maritime law, it's proportional. So I'm curious, what are some scenarios that you see in cases where you're just a little bit to contribute to this accident and you get nothing? I'm sure that you've had clients that have been deeply impacted by that.
For myself, Andrew. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to say it's actually interesting. I know Alabama, some states have that 1% rule where if the person that got injured is 1% at fault, they may not collect. Right. Maritime law is actually very different, not to get complicated here, but if you're in an accident, a maritime accident, there are situations where if the other party that caused the accident is only 1% at fault, you can actually collect all your damages against them. Right. So it's a very different situation. It's called joint and several liability. So it's actually the opposite, whereas Alabama law may say if you're 1% to blame, we're going to throw you out of court. Maritime law in certain situations actually says if the person that caused this is only 1% at fault, you get to collect all your damage against them. So that it can be very, very favorable, and it's a very unique type of law.
It's interesting. I'm curious. Go ahead, Bill.
No, and Andrew, that's why it's so important in a situation like this. As Tim just explained, the law in maritime and the state law in Alabama is completely opposite as far as contributory negligence and who's at fault and this and that. So the bottom line is you need to talk to someone to find out what your rights are.